The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Liam walked carefully, his boots pressing softly into the mossy ground of the alien planet. The trees here were tall and strange, with silver leaves that made no sound even when the wind passed through. The only thing he could hear was the soft hum of his scanner as it picked up plant readings. He had come here alone just to collect samples for the research team. It was supposed to be a simple mission. Peaceful, no danger. The planet had been marked safe with no signs of local life, just endless forests, strange rivers, and unexplored lands. But then he heard it, a loud crash. The ground shook slightly under his feet. Birds, if they were birds, flew up from the trees. A trail of smoke rose in the sky, curling through the leaves like a warning sign. Liam's eyes narrowed. That wasn't natural. He looked at the scanner. It didn't show anything, but something had fallen, something big. His heart beat faster and curiosity took control. Gripping his small side pack tighter, Liam moved toward the smoke. He had no weapons, only a small tool knife and a flashlight, but he needed to see what had fallen. As he walked deeper into the forest, the trees began to bend and crack. Something had crashed through here. A ship, maybe. The leaves were burnt on the edges. The smell of smoke and melted metal filled the air. Liam covered his mouth and moved slowly. Finally, he reached it, a small escape pod half buried in the ground. The side was dented and one of its legs had snapped off during the landing. Steam hissed from the back. The door was half open, sparks jumping from the edges. Liam stepped closer. Inside, he saw her. She was lying on her side, unmoving. Her skin was a pale bluish color. Not human. Her clothes were torn, some kind of uniform maybe, and there was a long burn across her arm. Blood, or something like it, had dried there. She had strange, elf-like ears, and hair the color of dark silver. She wasn't dead. Not yet. Liam dropped to his knees and checked her pulse. Weak, but there. Her breathing was shallow. She needed help. Now. "Hey," he said softly, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "I've got you, just hold on." He had no way to call for backup. His team was far away on the other side of the valley. His radio had lost signal hours ago. If he left her here, she might not survive. If he stayed, they might both be in danger. Still, he made his choice quickly. Carefully. He reached inside and lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, but her body was cold. He wrapped his jacket around her and started the long walk back to his small camp. The path was rough. Branches slapped against him, roots caught his boots, and the sky above began to darken with a coming storm. But Liam didn't stop. Every few minutes he looked down at her face. She was beautiful in a strange way, delicate, peaceful, even while hurt. She didn't wake. Not yet. By the time he reached the camp, the first drops of rain had started to fall. He placed her on his sleeping mat inside the small shelter. His hand shook as he pulled out the emergency med kit. He didn't know alien biology, but bleeding was bleeding and burns needed treatment. He worked quickly, carefully cleaning the wound and wrapping it in clean cloth. She flinched once, a sign of life. Liam felt a wave of relief. He gave her a few sips of water, just enough to wet her lips. The rain fell harder outside. Thunder rolled across the sky. Liam sat beside her, wet, cold, and tired. But he stayed awake, watching over the stranger he had just rescued. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she alone? He didn't know the answers. But he knew one thing for sure. She had been wounded and abandoned, left for dead. Now she wasn't alone anymore. Liam sat by the fire, his hands trembling slightly as he carefully examined the alien woman. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, but her face remained peaceful as though she was asleep. The rain outside had grown heavier, turning the world into a blur of falling water and distant thunder. He had no idea what to do next. The med kit he'd used was the only thing he had. It wasn't designed for alien species. What if she had different biology? What if his treatments only made things worse? But she was alive, and that was enough for now. Hours passed, and the fire burned low. Liam couldn't help but keep checking on her, making sure she was still breathing. He knew that she wouldn't survive out there in the rain, and even if he did manage to get help, it might take too long. But even in her unconscious state, he could tell she was not just any ordinary being. She had something different about her. Then, just as the storm outside began to calm, her eyes fluttered open. Liam leaned forward quickly, watching her closely. Her eyes were unlike anything he had ever seen before, large, almond-shaped, with a strange silvery hue. They were bright and clear, not clouded by pain or fever, but filled with confusion. She blinked, trying to focus on her surroundings. Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Hey," Liam whispered, his voice soft. "You're safe now. Don't worry. You're not alone." Her gaze shifted to him, and she flinched, suddenly tense. Her body stiffened as she tried to sit up. She winced at the movement, clearly in pain. No, stay still," Liam said gently, putting a hand on her shoulder to stop her. "You're hurt. You need to rest." Her eyes narrowed at his touch, as if unsure of his intentions. She didn't understand him, and he didn't understand her. They were strangers in every sense of the word. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. The storm outside had passed, leaving only the sound of dripping water and the crackle of the fire. The silence between them was thick, and Liam felt a strange mixture of concern and curiosity. He didn't know if she could speak his language, or if she even had a language at all. After what felt like an eternity, she shifted again, but this time, with more caution. She tried to sit up straighter, her body shaking slightly. A soft groan escaped her lips as she placed a hand on her chest where the burn still lingered. Liam couldn't help but notice the difference in her features, the way her skin glowed softly in the firelight, the small, delicate ears that tapered upward, and her otherworldly beauty. She wasn't human, that much was clear, but she was alive, and for reasons he didn't fully understand, he felt compelled to help her. "Here," he said, gently holding out a canteen of water. She looked at it, unsure at first, before her gaze lifted to meet his. There was something in her eyes, an unspoken plea for help, even if she couldn't say it aloud. Liam nodded. "It's water. You're thirsty, right?" She hesitated for a moment, and then, almost cautiously, she took the canteen. Her fingers were slender, delicate in a way he had never seen before. She brought it to her lips, sipping slowly. Liam felt a small sense of relief. It was a good sign that she was able to drink. Maybe she would be all right after all. As she drank, Liam took the opportunity to study her. Her eyes, those strange, silver eyes, kept glancing around the shelter, as if trying to make sense of everything. She seemed frightened, confused, and yet there was something stronger about her, something Liam couldn't quite place. When she finished drinking, she handed the canteen back to him, her expression still unsure. "Can you understand me?" Liam asked, his voice soft but clear. He didn't expect an answer, but it was worth trying. Her brow furrowed, and she gave a small shake of her head. She couldn't understand him. Of course not. She wasn't from Earth, and he had no idea where she came from or what language she spoke. It was like two worlds colliding, and neither of them knew the rules of the other. But then something unexpected happened. The alien woman spoke. It wasn't much, just a few broken words that Liam couldn't comprehend, but it was enough to make his heart race. The sound was soft, almost melodic, and yet tinged with a clear sense of desperation. She was trying to communicate. Liam leaned closer, his mind racing. "I don't understand you," he said softly, "but I'll help you. Just don't try to move too much, you're hurt." She looked at him again, her gaze softening slightly. It was clear that she trusted him, at least a little, even if she didn't fully understand who he was. A long silence passed between them, and for the first time since he found her, Liam allowed himself to relax. She wasn't dead, she wasn't gone. She was here, and that gave him hope. The storm outside had ended and the quiet night stretched on. He would figure out a way to communicate with her. He would keep her safe no matter what. Because deep down, Liam knew that her story was far from over. The days blurred together as Liam worked to keep the alien woman Aralia safe. The shelter he had built was simple, nothing more than a small tarp stretched between trees to shield them from the elements. Still, it was better than nothing, and it was working for now. Aralia had started to recover more quickly than Liam had expected. Her wounds, although still tender, were healing. The burn across her arm had started to scab over and her breathing was steadier. She had started to speak in her strange language more frequently. Though Liam could only pick up the odd word here and there, she would make gestures with her hands, sometimes pointing at things in the distance, and at other times, she would try to explain something in her language, her voice soft yet urgent. Liam had tried everything he could think of to communicate with her. He showed her objects from his bag, pointing at each one, saying its name in English, hoping she would pick up a few words. Sometimes, Aralia would repeat them, but it was clear the language barrier was still too strong to form a full conversation. But there was something else. As much as Aralia had begun to heal physically, there was a quiet sadness in her eyes. She would stare into the distance for hours, her mind clearly far away. She didn't speak of it, but Liam could see that the pain of what had happened to her, the crash, the betrayal, still haunted her. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, Liam was checking the fire when Aralia's gaze shifted, her body tensing. Liam noticed and turned to see what had caught her attention. A small blinking light on his scanner caught his eye, a signal he hadn't seen before. His heart skipped a beat. He tapped it, and his fingers froze as a message flashed across the screen. Hostile signal detected. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. His eyes flicked over to Aralia, who now stood, her eyes wide with fear. "Who?" Liam whispered, half to himself. The words he spoke were useless. She couldn't understand him, but she understood the danger. Liam quickly scanned the area, heart racing. There was no sign of movement around them, at least none that he could see. But the signal was clear. Someone, or something, was nearby. And they weren't friendly. "Stay here," Liam ordered quietly, even though he knew she didn't understand. He grabbed his scanner, turned off the fire, and moved cautiously towards the edge of the camp. His mind raced, trying to think through the possibilities. Was it a search team? Had someone tracked the crash? The hostile signal was strong, and there was no mistaking it. Aralia followed him, taking slow steps as if instinctively knowing the danger. She placed a hand on his arm, her fingers trembling. Liam looked at her, trying to communicate through his eyes. He wanted her to stay hidden, but her expression was firm, determined. It was clear that she wouldn't leave him. He had saved her, and now she would not let him face danger alone. The tension between them was palpable. They both knew that the enemy wasn't far away. They had no idea how much time they had, but Liam knew they had to act quickly. "Stay low," he whispered to her. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all they had. He moved slowly, keeping to the trees, and Aralia stayed close behind. Every step felt like it could be their last, and every sound seemed too loud in the silence of the forest. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the trees, distant but unmistakable. The hum of engines, the sound of ships. Liam's heart sank. The patrol had arrived. His mind raced through options, but there were no good ones. He couldn't fight them, not without weapons. He was just one man with an alien woman, and they were no match for a patrol of armed soldiers. He motioned for Aralia to crouch behind a large tree, its roots thick and twisting. They both ducked low to the ground, hearts pounding. From their hiding place they could see movement through the trees, shadows, shapes, and the flash of armored suits. The patrol wasn't far. Liam counted at least 4 soldiers, scanning the area with infrared lights. Their movements were methodical, their eyes sharp. They were searching for something, or someone. Aralia stiffened beside him, her eyes darting nervously. Liam's hand tightened around her wrist. He couldn't let them see her. If they did, there would be no escape. He scanned the area, looking for any chance to throw them off. He spotted a small ravine nearby. It wasn't much, but it was a path that might lead them deeper into the forest, away from the patrol. If they could make it there, they might have a chance. "Follow me," Liam whispered urgently, his voice barely audible. He didn't wait for a response. Instead, he began to move, slowly and quietly, staying in the shadows. Aralia hesitated for a moment, but then she followed. They moved swiftly through the trees, staying as low as possible. Every step was calculated. The sound of the patrol grew, louder, but Liam's eyes stayed fixed on the ravine. It was their only hope. But as they neared the edge of the ravine, the worst happened. One of the soldiers shouted, his voice carrying through the air. The patrol had seen something. They were getting closer. Liam's heart raced. He pulled Aralia toward the ravine, but he could hear the soldiers closing in fast. They didn't have much time left. "Run!" Liam shouted, pushing Aralia toward the edge of the ravine. They ran, together, with everything they had. Liam and Aralia ran as fast as they could, the ground beneath them uneven and slippery. Their breath came in quick gasps as they dashed through the forest, moving deeper into the wilderness. The sound of the patrol behind them was growing louder, the crunch of boots on the soft forest floor echoing in the quiet of the trees. "Stay close," Liam hissed, glancing over his shoulder. He could see the shadows of the soldiers emerging from the trees, their movements coordinated and fast. He knew they were getting closer. Aralia's pace had slowed, her injured arm making it hard for her to keep up. Liam's heart tightened as he saw her falter. She was stronger than he thought, but the pain was clearly too much for her to handle at full speed. She stumbled slightly, but Liam caught her before she fell. "You have to keep going," he urged, his voice low but firm. Aralia nodded, her eyes filled with determination. She took a deep breath and pushed herself forward again. But the exhaustion was evident in her movements. Every step was a struggle. Liam knew they needed to reach the ravine ahead. The steep drop could slow down the soldiers, and if they were lucky, they might be able to lose them in the thick woods below. But time was running out. The soldiers were nearly on them, and the sound of their pursuit was getting louder. They reached the ravine's edge, a narrow but deep trench that cut through the forest. It looked risky, but it was their best chance. The ground was steep, but there were enough roots and rocks to make it down if they moved carefully. Liam glanced over at Aralia, her eyes wide with fear but also trust. She didn't hesitate. With a swift movement, she began to climb down into the ravine, her hands gripping the rough edges as she descended. Liam followed closely behind, keeping an eye on the patrol's movements. He could still hear them crashing through the trees, their voices shouting commands to one another. They were getting closer. Liam slid down a final slope and landed with a soft thud at the bottom of the ravine. He turned quickly to help Aralia, who was struggling with her footing. She winced as she reached the bottom, clearly in pain, but she didn't complain. Instead, she nodded to Liam, a silent acknowledgement of her willingness to keep fighting. The patrol was almost above them now, and Liam's heart raced. He motioned for Aralia to stay low. They pressed themselves against the jagged sides of the ravine, trying to make themselves as small as possible. The sound of the soldiers' boots grew louder, the crackling of the underbrush telling them that they were dangerously close. Liam held his breath, praying they wouldn't be spotted. He knew they couldn't afford to be caught. If the soldiers found them, they would be taken, and Aralia would be captured again. She had no chance of escaping on her own. Not with her injuries. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the patrol passed above them. Liam could hear the soldiers talking, but they were still too far from the edge of the ravine to see them. He barely dared to move, waiting for the right moment to slip away. Then, finally, the sounds of the soldiers began to fade. The distant calls and the rustling of the trees signaled that they had moved on. Liam waited for a few more seconds, listening for any signs of movement. When he was sure the coast was clear, he slowly stood up and extended a hand to Aralia. She looked at him, her expression still tense but relieved. They're gone, Liam whispered, his voice low but filled with a quiet sense of victory. Aurelia nodded, and with his help, she carefully rose to her feet. They were both exhausted, but they couldn't stop. They had to keep moving. Liam looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. She was still hurt, and the danger wasn't over yet. He had to get her to safety, but he had no idea how far the soldiers might be, or how many of them were still out there. "We need to find shelter," he said, his voice steady despite the fear he still felt. "Can you walk?" Aurelia's eyes met his. She nodded, though it was clear she was in pain. They couldn't rest yet. The night was coming, and the forest would be even more dangerous in the dark. They moved through the ravine, carefully climbing over rocks and roots. Liam kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, constantly on the lookout for danger. But as they walked, something unexpected happened. Aurelia stopped. Liam turned to look at her, his face full of concern. "What's wrong?" She held out a hand, her fingers brushing the air as if trying to sense something. Her expression was focused, her eyes scanning the darkening woods. Liam froze, trying to understand what she was doing. Was she hearing something he couldn't? Or was there another danger they hadn't noticed? Aurelia pointed ahead toward a small rise in the distance. Liam squinted into the fading light, but he couldn't see anything. He stepped forward cautiously, moving closer to where she had pointed. Then he saw it, a flicker of light. Faint, but unmistakable. Liam's heart raced again. He could hear the sound of a ship, faint but growing louder. The danger was still out there, and now it seemed like it was getting closer. The flicker of light in the distance grew stronger, and the hum of a ship's engines reached Liam's ears. The patrol soldiers might have been close, but this new signal was more immediate. Something, or someone, was coming. Aurelia's eyes widened, and she grabbed Liam's arm, pulling him to a stop. The fear was obvious in her gaze. "Not again," Liam muttered under his breath, though he knew the words meant nothing. He had no way of knowing who was approaching or whether they were friend or foe. But with the patrol still lingering nearby, he couldn't afford to take any chances. Liam turned to Aurelia, trying to communicate through his eyes. "We need to move fast," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand him. He looked around, his mind racing. He needed to find a place to hide, somewhere they could remain undetected until they knew who was coming. The ship was still far enough that they could move if they were careful. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't risk staying out in the open, not with Aurelia still recovering. He scanned the area, looking for something that could give them an advantage. "There's a cave," he said quietly, pointing toward the base of a large rock formation. It was a small, dark opening in the side of the hill, a place that might offer them cover, at least for a little while. Aurelia nodded, her face tense with worry. Liam motioned for her to follow and started to move in the direction of the cave. His body felt heavy with exhaustion, but he forced his legs to keep moving. Every step seemed to take more energy than the last, but he knew they couldn't stop now. The ship's engines were louder now. Whoever was in that ship was drawing closer. Liam's mind raced through possible scenarios. Could it be another enemy? Patrol? Or was it a rescue team? The thought of a rescue filled him with hope, but he didn't dare trust it yet. They had no way of knowing what would happen until they saw who was behind the controls of that ship. As they neared the cave, the ground beneath them became more uneven. Liam looked over his shoulder to check on Aurelia. She was moving slower now, her steps heavy, but she was determined not to let him down. He didn't know how much more she could take, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. "Almost. There," he said under his breath. They reached the cave, and Liam carefully pulled Aurelia inside. The cave was small but deep, with jagged rock walls that offered some protection from the outside. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best they had. Liam pushed his back against the cave wall and signaled for Aurelia to stay low. She crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the entrance, her breathing shallow. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. They just waited, each second dragging by as the ship came closer. Liam's thoughts raced. He had no weapons, nothing to defend himself or Aurelia with. He was a civilian, trained for research, not combat. But he had to do something. He couldn't just hide and hope for the best. If it was the enemy, they would never let them go. He glanced at Auralia, her eyes still locked on the cave entrance. He could see the fear in her, but there was something else too, a quiet strength. She had been abandoned by her own people, and now she was depending on him, and he would not let her down. The hum of the ship's engines grew louder. Liam felt his heart pounding in his chest as the light from the ship filtered into the cave, casting long shadows on the rocky walls. He held his breath, praying that whoever was in the ship would pass by without noticing them. But just as the ship's shadow passed over the entrance, a voice broke the silence. "Did you hear that?" Liam froze. The voice wasn't coming from the ship. It was coming from outside the cave. It was a soldier, one of the patrol. They had found them. The panic hit Liam like a wave. He glanced at Auralia, her eyes wide with fear. She reached for his arm, her grip tight. She didn't need to say anything. They both knew what was happening. They had to make a choice. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, thinking. If they stayed, hidden, they might escape the soldiers' notice for now. But sooner or later the patrol would search every inch of the area. They couldn't wait here forever. "I'll draw them away," Liam whispered, barely audible. He could see the hesitation in Auralia's eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew what needed to be done. Liam glanced at the cave entrance one last time, then turned to her. "You have to hide deeper in the cave. Stay quiet." Auralia hesitated for a second, then nodded, understanding. She slipped further into the shadows, her body blending with the darkness of the cave. Liam stayed low, his eyes fixed on the entrance. The footsteps outside were growing closer. Liam's heart pounded in his chest, his hands trembling. He was scared, more scared than he had ever been in his life, but he couldn't let fear control him now. Liam took a deep breath. It was time. He moved toward the cave entrance, stepping carefully but quickly. He had to make it look like he was running. He had to give Auralia the time she needed to escape. He didn't know if he would make it back alive. But if he didn't, he would have made sure she did. Just as he reached the entrance, he heard the soldiers' voices again. "Over here," one of them shouted. Liam stepped out into the open, his heart racing. Liam didn't wait to see if they'd seen him. The moment the soldier shouted, he bolted. His feet pounded against the wet forest floor, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The rain had turned the earth into a slippery mess, but Liam didn't care. He had only one goal now: to draw the soldiers away from Auralia. Behind him, the soldiers shouted again, their voices cutting through the forest. Liam didn't look back. He just ran, weaving between trees and around thick patches of underbrush. He could hear their boots crashing through the wet foliage, but he refused to slow down. He had to keep ahead of them. A crackling sound in the distance told him they had deployed a search drone, and the bright beam of a flashlight cut through the trees, scanning the ground in rapid sweeps. Liam's heart raced as he ducked behind, a large tree trunk crouching low to avoid the drone's spotlight. He stayed as still as possible, his body pressed against the cold bark. The light passed over him, but Liam knew it would circle back soon. He wasn't going to outrun the drone. His only hope was to keep moving, keep the soldiers on his tail long enough to give Auralia a chance. She was still in the cave, hidden from view. He had to trust that she was smart enough to stay quiet and out of sight. She had survived more than he could imagine. She could survive this too. The searchlight swung back toward him and Liam pushed off the tree, running again. His muscles burned and his legs were beginning to ache, but he didn't stop. The rain kept falling, thickening into a steady downpour, and the forest felt like it was closing in on him. Ahead he spotted a small rise in the terrain, a hill covered with thick grass and rocks. It was higher ground, and if he could get there, he might be able to create some distance between himself and the patrol. He pushed himself harder, the ground slipping underfoot, but he climbed, making his way to the top. But just as he reached the crest of the hill, a voice shouted from behind him, "There he is!" Liam turned, just in time to see one of the soldiers break through the trees. The soldier raised his weapon, aiming directly at him. Liam's heart jumped into his throat. This was it. Instinctively, Liam dropped to the ground, rolling out of the soldier's line of sight. The soldier fired once, the sound of the shot loud and deafening in the quiet of the rain. Liam scrambled to his feet, heart pounding in his chest. He had no time to think. He ran again, zigzagging through the trees, using the rain and the darkness to hide his movements. But the soldier wasn't alone. The others were closing in, moving fast, their voices and footsteps surrounding him. The forest was alive with sound, branches breaking, leaves rustling, and the sharp clack of boots against wet earth. Liam's breathing was ragged and his legs were starting to feel like lead. He couldn't keep this up for much longer. He spotted an old log up ahead, half buried in the ground. Without thinking, he dove behind it, pressing his body against the wet wood. He lay still, holding his breath as the soldiers moved closer. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of a way out. But the soldiers were getting closer, and the drone was still searching. Liam's mind raced. He needed to do something. He couldn't just wait to be found. Then, he heard a crack, a loud snap of a twig. One of the soldiers had stepped too close. Liam gritted his teeth. The time for hiding was over. He burst from behind the log, charging straight toward the soldier. The soldier barely had time to react. Liam tackled him hard, knocking him to the ground. The soldier struggled, but Liam was fueled by desperation. He grabbed the soldier's weapon and used it to knock the man unconscious. Liam didn't stop to think. He picked up the soldier's rifle and turned to face the others, his chest heaving with exertion. The other soldiers were rushing toward him, their weapons raised. Liam was outnumbered, but he wasn't going down without a fight. He aimed the rifle just in time to fire a warning shot. The blast sent the soldiers scattering, their eyes wide with shock. They had underestimated him, and now he had the upper hand. But the drone was still hovering nearby, its bright light sweeping across the area. Liam knew he couldn't hold his position for long. He had to end this quickly. He ducked behind a large rock, using it as cover, and fired another shot. The soldiers hesitated, trying to assess the situation. But Liam was already moving, running at full speed, heading toward a dense patch of trees where the drone's light wouldn't reach. He could hear the soldiers calling to each other, but he didn't stop. He ran, pushing himself harder than ever, his mind focused only on getting away. Ahead he saw the edge of the forest, the line where the trees ended and the open plains began. It was a wide space, but it could give him the chance he needed to escape. The soldiers were still following, but Liam was close to the edge. He could make it. But as he reached the open field, something unexpected happened. A new set of lights flashed across the sky. It wasn't the patrol. It was something bigger, a ship. Liam's eyes widened as the ship descended from the clouds, its sleek body cutting through the rain. It hovered for a moment before lowering to the ground with a soft thud. The soldiers stopped in their tracks, their eyes fixed on the ship. Liam didn't know who was inside, but he didn't care. Help had arrived. The ship touched down softly, its engines humming as it settled into the wet grass. The rain poured steadily, but the arrival of the ship seemed to stop everything else in its tracks. Liam stood frozen for a moment, his heart racing as the soldiers from the patrol hesitated, clearly surprised by the sudden appearance. It wasn't just a rescue, it was something far more unexpected. Liam took a slow step forward, still gripping the rifle he had taken from one of the soldiers. His mind was a blur of confusion and relief. Was this the help he had hoped for? Or was it more trouble? Before he could make another move, the door of the ship opened. The ramp descended, revealing figures stepping out onto the wet ground. The first thing Liam noticed was their attire, suits that glimmered with a soft metallic sheen. They weren't soldiers, but they looked prepared for anything. The leader of the group, a tall figure with striking features and silver hair, stepped forward. His eyes scanned the scene with clear, purposeful focus. He looked down at Liam and then at the soldiers who had been chasing him. "You're the one who's been causing a disturbance," the leader said, his voice calm but commanding. Liam's heart raced as he lowered the rifle slightly, but he didn't drop it. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough from exhaustion. The leader tilted his head. We are the Galactic Peacekeepers. We've been tracking this sector for some time. You're lucky we found you first. Liam blinked, trying to make sense of the words. Peacekeepers? This wasn't a military rescue. They weren't part of the human army, that much was clear. They were chasing us, Liam said, his voice hardening as he pointed toward the retreating soldiers. Those people, they were trying to capture her. The peacekeeper leader nodded, thoughtfully, but didn't speak right away. Instead, his gaze shifted to the soldiers who were now retreating, clearly intimidated by the sudden arrival of the peacekeepers. The tension between them was palpable, but the soldiers had no choice but to fall back. The leader then turned his attention to Auralia, who had been hiding behind a tree, watching the whole scene unfold. She stepped forward, her movements cautious, but determined. She locked eyes with the leader, and for a moment there was a silent understanding between them. The leader's expression softened. He gave a brief nod to one of his companions, who moved quickly toward Auralia, offering her a hand. "Come with us," the peacekeeper leader said to her, in a voice that was both gentle and firm. Auralia looked at Liam, her expression torn between fear and hope. She hadn't said much since the crash, still unsure of who to trust. But something about these peacekeepers seemed different. They were here to help. Liam stepped forward, his voice quiet but urgent. "Where are you taking her?" The leader's eyes met Liam's, a flicker of curiosity passing through them. "We're taking her to safety. You've done your part. Now, it's time for us to handle the rest." Liam felt a pang of uncertainty. Had he done enough? He wasn't a soldier, just a man who had stumbled into an alien world. But Auralia had trusted him. He couldn't just let her go without knowing she would be safe. "I'm coming with you," Liam said firmly. His voice was stronger now, the decision clear in his mind. He had to know she would be all right. He had to make sure they both had a future. The leader seemed to consider this for a moment. "You're welcome to come," he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "But know this, once we leave this planet, it will be far from the world you knew. The path ahead will not be easy." Liam nodded. He understood. The Earth he had known, the life he had lived, would never be the same again. But that didn't matter. He had a purpose now. He couldn't leave her, not after everything they had been through together. Auralia stepped toward the leader, her gaze lingering on Liam for a moment. She had grown stronger over the past few days, and there was a determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She trusted him, and now she was willing to trust the peacekeepers too. As she moved toward the ship, Liam followed, his steps steady. The rain had started to lighten, and the skies above seemed to clear, as though the planet itself was welcoming them. The soldiers were nowhere in sight, and the forest around them was quiet again, the danger having passed. The peacekeeper leader led them up the ramp, into the ship. Inside, the walls were sleek and clean, with glowing panels and soft lighting. It was unlike anything Liam had ever seen. Advanced technology that seemed almost too perfect, too smooth. It was a reminder that he was no longer in his world. As the ramp closed behind them, the ship lifted off the ground, rising higher into the air. Through the window, Liam could see the vastness of the planet below, the forests, the mountains, and the oceans. His home, no, their home, faded away beneath them. But the future wasn't as uncertain as it had once seemed. Auralia sat next to him, her eyes looking out the window. There was still fear in her gaze, but there was also something else. Hope. Hope for a new beginning. A new chapter. Liam looked at her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. He wasn't sure what awaited them, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever the future held, they would face it together.